Okay, so we are getting down to the end of John. We have four more chapters in the Gospel of John. Um, we're going to be in John 18 today. And when 18, we're going to cover the prayer in the garden and his arrest. John 19 will be the crucifixion of Jesus. John 20 will be his resurrection. And then John 21 is when after his resurrection, he appears to the disciples when they're back fishing again, and you might have said they gave up, but he calls them back and gives them his last instructions before he ascends into heaven. So that's John 18, 19, 20, and 21. So 18 and 19, I'm going to kind of go back and forth. I'm going to kind of make them flow together, because the whole thing about his prayer, his arrest, his crucifixion, I want to try to make a point in both these chapters, and so I'm going to kind of combine them together in two teachings. So let's go to John 18 and verse 1. It says in verse 1, when Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Cedron, where there was a garden, into which he entered, and his disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew that place, because many times Jesus went there with his disciples. So Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Okay, so right here, I want to back up to Matthew, because from the 4 chapters of Jesus giving his last instructions, 14, 15, 16, and 17, we covered those chapters where Jesus says his last words. Spent a lot of time in John talking to his disciples one last time before he's crucified. But you get right into 18, and it does not cover, John does not cover his prayer in the garden. Okay, you have to go to Matthew to see this. So before Judas comes here in verse 2 with the people to arrest Jesus, Jesus prays with his disciples. So I want to cover that. You won't find that in John. Let's go back to Matthew 26. So we know in Matthew 26, we covered this already, where Jesus, when you start in verse 23, talks about the Last Supper. Okay, Matthew 26, where he says, take this is my body, eat of it. Take this blood, this is the blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. That's 28. And then as often as you do this, it doesn't say here, but in 1 Corinthians, when Paul goes over about the Last Supper, and in other gospel, Jesus says, as often as you do this to remember me. Do this in remembrance of me. He's not saying do this to where you actually eat my body and drink my blood physically, but spiritually, every time we do this, we have communion, we go back and remember this Last Supper. It's kind of like, I thought of an example the other day. I'd taken out my album, my wedding album, of our wedding day, my wife and I. So you open up the pages and you look through the whole event of that day. Okay, you look through, it was at night actually. You go through the whole event of the day and the night, or whatever your wedding is, and you look through the pictures of that. So you look back at this to remember, to go back and remember how it began. You go back and looking at this album to remember the day you and your wife were married. So it's a type of remembrance when you go back and open the album. Now, the picture of my wife that's not her, okay? I can't have a relationship, I can't have a communication with this picture of my wife, okay? I can't have a communication with this album. It's simply I go back to remember how it was on our wedding day and our wedding night. Well, Jesus is saying here, you go back and do the Lord's Supper over and over to remember that he laid his life down for us at the cross, okay? That he shed his body and blood so that we could be born again and filled with his spirit and saved from sin. This is a remembrance of what he had to do to buy for us the salvation of our spirit and soul. All right. So it's a remembrance. You can't have a communication. You can't have. You can't speak to this bread and the bread speaks back to you. You know, there's no Jesus Himself. The presence of Jesus is not alive in a communion bread where you can sit before this communion bread and speak to it. And it speaks back to you. No more can I speak to this picture of my wife in the album and she speaks back to me. Okay, I do this to remember what it was the first day it started our life together. Well, you look back at communion table. When you have communion, you look back at how it started. Okay, it started with Jesus laying down His life for us and giving His body and blood for us. Okay, so this false teaching of, you know, that this communion is actually Jesus Himself. It's not. Okay, no more than this album picture in the album of my wife is actually my wife. Okay, it's just a remembrance of what it was, of how it was when we started. Communion is a remembrance. So I didn't want to go that far into that, but so go down to, so they go into the garden, and this is a place that's skipped in John. He doesn't cover this. And then came Jesus with them, verse 36. Jesus came with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and He said to His disciples, sit here while I go and pray over yonder. So He took with Him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and He began to be very sorrowful and heavy. And then He said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Wait here with me, and watch with me, or pray with me. So He went a little further, and fell on His face, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but Thy will be done. And He came unto the disciples, and He found them sleeping. And He said to Peter, what? Could you not even watch with me for 1 hour? So watch means pray. Could you not pray with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray that you do not enter into temptation, because the spirit is really indeed willing, but your flesh is weak. So He went away again, and the second time prayed, saying this, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, let your will be done. And He came, and He found them sleeping again, and their eyes, because their eyes were very heavy. And He left them, and He went again and prayed the third time, saying the exact same words. Then came He to His disciples and said to them, sleep on, take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man will be betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, He is at hand that has betrayed me. And then in John we'll get right into Judas bringing the soldiers to arrest Him. So just before Judas came in to the scene with the soldiers, Jesus prayed this prayer, okay, in Matthew 26. Now I want to get something out of this. Okay, notice here in verse 37, He tells them in verse 38, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Pray with me. And 39, He says, Father, if it's possible, at all possible, let this cup pass away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but Thy will be done. Now it says He prays this 3 separate times, okay? And 3 separate times the disciples fall asleep. They can't stay awake and pray with Him. All right, so you think, well, Jesus, see, the thing is, we think that once we become a born-again, Spirit-filled Christian, everything's just going to be lovely in our life. We won't suffer in our soul. Okay, now Jesus came to heal and save our soul. He came to save our flesh. We can be healed by the blood of Jesus from physical sickness. Our spirit can be made alive to God and free from sin in our life. But there are things we're going to go through in our soul. Soul means your emotions and your will. Your will has to bow down to the will of God. Your emotions might go through sorrowful times when people, relations that you know, loved ones don't understand you, reject you, turn away from you because of your life for Christ you're living now, because of the truth you tell them. and they may hate you for it, or they may just not cut off their friendship with you because you speak the truth to them and they don't want to hear it. So your soul will be sorrowful, okay? It doesn't mean your soul won't go through sorrow, but that's God saving your soul to the point where your soul doesn't care about the opinions of other people, whether it be your husband or wife, whether it be your mother, father, son or daughter, good friends. Your soul doesn't care about that anymore more than it cares about what God wants in your life. He said here, Father, I really would like this cross to pass from me. I really don't want to go to the cross. Jesus did not want to go to the cross as a man, okay? He knew what kind of pain the cross would put upon him and humiliation. But he said, I really don't want to go. But if that's God's will, if that's what God, if that's what I want to do, if that's what I have to do, if the Father God sees that's what's needed for me to lay down my life for the world to save sinners, then I'll do it for my Father's sake. Okay, and this is the greatest love. Greater love, John's in some place in John I cover that. Greater love has no man than this, than a man would lay down his life for his friends. But he was laying down his life for sinners. Okay, and that's the greatest love, and not because he wanted to go to the cross here in this prayer, but he'll do it because God the Father sees that's the only way. And so we have to be like that. We have to be to the point where that's not what I want in my life. I want to be healed from sickness. I want to be free from sin. But to lay down my life for other people I don't even know, in whatever way God chooses to spend my life for others, I'll have to let him show me, and that will bring sometimes sorrow to my soul because of rejection and other things. But Jesus was willing to do whatever God showed him to do. Now go to Psalm 37. I have that on the board. And I want to clear up a passage in Psalm 37 that many people misquote or misunderstand. Psalm 37, verse 1 says, Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Don't be envious against the workers of iniquity, for they will soon be cut down like the grass, and they will wither away as the green herb. But trust in the Lord and do good. So shall you dwell in the land, and you verily will be fed. Delight yourself, this is what I'm getting to, delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of your heart. Commit your way to him. See, Jesus was committing his way to God. I'm committing this to you, Lord. I don't really want to go through the cross. If there's a way I can, get around this, I'd rather. But if that's what I have to do to lay down my life for people, I'll do it. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will bring it to pass. 7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret yourself because of him that prospers in the way, because of men who bring wicked devices to pass. Verse 9, evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. Now 5 times in this chapter 37, you read the whole chapter, at least 5 times, if not more, he talks about those who wait on the Lord, those who are teachable and humble, will end up in the end inheriting the whole earth. Okay, we may not inherit the world as we know it in this lifetime. Okay, but we will inherit the earth when Christ comes back to rule over the earth. We will rule and reign with him over the whole earth. That's after this life. If we obey him to the fullest, like Jesus obeyed God to the fullest, even to the point of death on the cross. So he was exalted and given power over all heaven and earth because he obeyed God. And he's coming back to rule the earth, and we will inherit it with him in that day. But for now, the only thing we're inheriting is our salvation. We're being saved from sickness and disease on this earth now. We can be saved from sin that wants to tempt us now. We can be saved from our emotions that don't want to fully obey God because of cost that it'll cost us. But we can be saved from that now. That's our inheritance, the salvation of our spirit, soul, and body now. But we will inherit this earth one day with Christ if we continue to obey him to the fullest. So where it says in verse 4, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. People will take that and say, see, if you're delighting the Lord, Whatever your heart desires, he'll give it to you. Nope, that's not what it's saying. Jesus here desired, his heart desired that this cross would pass from him, that he could get away from it. If there's any way that I can get around this, Lord, that's what his desire was in his heart. But he gave up to the desire that God put in his heart. So what it means here is, if you delight yourself in the Lord, God will put the desire in your heart that he wants. He will give you a desire in your heart that pleases him. He's not going to give you the desires that your heart wants. He will put in your heart the correct desire. And the correct desire for Christ was, I'm going to do whatever my Father deems necessary to lay down my life for whoever he thinks necessary. So that's the desire Father had put in Jesus' heart. And because of that, he could overcome the temptation of wanting to try to get out of this. All right. So if you delight in the Lord, he will put the right desire in your heart. And I'm going to get into an example. I'm not sure about this sitting, but the next sitting, I'm going to give an example of a race. Okay, the Bible talks about in Hebrews 12 about running a race. And I'm going to give an example of that, of what I'm talking about, this desire in your heart. Okay, so let's go back to John. Okay, and Hebrews 12. Okay, so let me just read Hebrews 12, and we're going to go back to this probably in the next teaching again. So in Hebrews 12 says, 1, wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily besets us, or easily causes us to give up or stumble. And let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, who is the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God now. Consider him that endured such a contradiction of sinners against himself, unless you would be weary and faint in your mind. So it was for the joy set before him that he went and endured the cross. So even though his soul was sorrowful and did not necessarily want to go through the cross, it was the joy was set before him, in front of him. What would happen at the end of all this? And at the end of all this, he knew that God would resurrect him, and God would set him on high above all principalities, all powers on heaven and earth, and given him rule over the earth one day. That was like a trophy set before him. And the fact that he would actually please God. And God would say to him, well done, you pleased me well, my good and faithful servant. That's in Matthew 24, 25, somewhere around there. That those who obey God, in the end, God will bring him before them and say, you have done well, my good faithful servant. Hear and inherit the things that I have for you in the kingdom. Inherit the joy of the Lord. So it's things that we have to look ahead to go through things, weights and sins that want to slow us down. Okay. And I'm going to give that example later on about a race. So go back to 18. So here comes Judas in verse 3, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests, and they came with lanterns and torches and weapons. Therefore Jesus, knowing all things that would happen, he went forth, he just went up to them and said, whom do you seek? And they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said to them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood right there with them. And as soon as Jesus said, I am he, they all fell backwards and fell to the ground. Now this is amazing, okay? So he asked them again, well, whom seek ye? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus answered, I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let all these go their way, or let his disciples go. It's me you're looking for. Now go back to 6. As soon as he said, I am he, they fell down backwards on the ground. Now the power anointing of God, can you imagine? He said, here I am. You came to get me. This is me. This is it. I'm the one. And they all fell backwards on the ground. Can you imagine? The power of God just blew on them and they fell backwards. Now, Jesus could have walked right over them. See, this is to prove that Jesus gave up himself willingly. They couldn't take him unless God lets them and Jesus lets them. Okay. Now, can you imagine the temptation? You already know that he prayed that if there's any way I can get away from this cross, show me, but if not, I'll do your will. Now, God must have settled in his heart, no, this is my will. Because if not, when they fell backwards, he could have walked right over them and gone his way. Okay? So this was not a temptation. This was not an answer that, oh, maybe God doesn't want me to go to the cross. You know, if not, he would have knocked them all down on the ground in front of me to give me the opportunity to walk right through them. No, he was already settled before this happened in his prayer closet. That's why the prayer closet is so important, to know what God's will is for your life. Because if not, many people say, oh, I know this is God because this happened. Well, you mean God didn't tell you beforehand this is what he wanted? Oh, no, I was just waiting for him to show me. And because this thing happened in the world, I know this must be God. See, you can't depend on things happening like it was a coincidence. This must be God because look what happened. It was such a coincidence. You know, you can't trust in coincidences to prove that God is wanting you to go that way. Okay? Because right here proves it. You have to already have it settled in your prayer room that this is what God wants. So that if coincidence comes up and shows you a different way to take, you already know, no, God already showed me I have to go to the cross. So they stood back up, and he said, let these go their way, that the scripture might be fulfilled. Verse 9, oh, of them which you gave me, I've lost none of them. So here, okay, look at this. Verse 10, Simon Peter, having a sword, he drew it, and he cut off the high priest's servant's ear, his right ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. And then Jesus told Peter, put up your sword into its sheath. The cup which my Father has given me, shall I not drink of it? Then the band and the captain and the officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him up. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, which was the high priest that year. So they took him before the high priest. Now in another gospel, it will tell you that they all fled at this point. They all ran away, all of them. They took off. They all said, oh, we'll never betray you, Jesus, but they all took off. And Jesus had told them ahead of time that you were going to all leave me. And Peter said, I'll never leave you. Remember? And Jesus said, oh, you'll deny me 3 times before the cock even crows tonight. So Jesus knew what was going to happen. He knew he had to go to the cross. So they all fled. It doesn't say that here, but in another gospel it does. So right here, Peter takes out his sword. All right. And he cuts off the high priest's ears. Jesus was not about to let this guy leave earth. You know, at one point when if you go back, I think it's in Matthew 16, I want to say, where Peter says, upon Jesus tells Peter, who do you say that I am, Peter? And Peter says, you're the Son of God. You're the Christ. And then Jesus tells him, well, no man revealed this to you. God, my Father, revealed this to you. And it's upon this kind of a revelation where people will get from hearing God for themselves. This is what I'm going to build my church on. This is the rock I'm going to build my church on. He wasn't telling Peter he was going to be the first pope and the head of the whole church. God called 12 disciples to head the church, not just Peter. And he said, upon this rock I'll build my church. And your name now will be called Rock, because you're no longer there's going to be a day coming when you no longer will be tossed to and fro like a piece of paper in the wind. Because at that point, he's going to deny him here. He's going to be like a paper blown in the wind. But he says, I'm changing your name to Rock. You will be stand firm one day like a rock, okay, like a stone, and they won't be able to move you. And that's going to come when he's baptized with the Holy Spirit. So then later on, he tells him in Matthew 16, after he tells Peter this, that you're going to be like a rock one day. And he says, okay, I'm going to go to the cross and die, in the same chapter. And Peter says, that will never happen to you, Lord. I'm not going to let it happen. And Jesus tells Peter, get behind me, Satan. You're thinking like the devil. Now, he just told Peter he was going to be like a rock in the church along with the other 12, because Peter was so wishy-washy. He just finished telling them that, and then he tells them he's thinking like Satan because he says, oh, I'm not going to let anybody take you. You know, this will not happen to you. Well, right here, he must have said the same mindset because he wasn't letting anybody take Jesus from earth. Can you imagine this guy who raised the dead? He saw him. Peter watched him do all this stuff, raise the dead. He watched him walk on water and told Peter to come walking on the water with him, and he did. Okay, he watched him turn 2 loaves and 5 fish and feed 4,000 people, I think it was, with just 2 loaves and 4 fish or 5 fish. He saw all this, watched him cure lepers. And they're going to take him and kill him? No, I don't think so. He took his sword and he was going to stop him. I think Peter by himself could have took on every one of those soldiers. That's how strong-willed he was and determined not to let them take this perfect ruler, you know, this perfect person from earth who would take care of all of his needs. But he didn't realize that once Jesus left, he was going to send the Holy Spirit, and Peter would have the power to do the same things Jesus did. He still was in unbelief. So we have to realize, you know, there was a time in the Old Testament, in history. I'm going to go back in history a little bit. In history, we know in the Old Testament, when God called the nation of Israel out of Egypt, remember the bondage in Egypt. You can go back to my teachings in the very beginning of starting in the first lesson. I went into the Old Testament for 41 teachings. And then I started in the Gospel of John. But you go back and I cover that, where they took him out of Egypt, and he started a nation with the 12 tribes of Jacob, the 12 sons. Jacob was changed his name also to Israel. Jacob meant he was a trickster. He would trick people. He was a deceiver. But he changed his name to Israel, meaning he was going to be a prince with God. Now, he didn't start out that way. Like Peter didn't start out a rock, a strong foundation of the church. He didn't start out that way, but Jesus was going to change him, so he gave him another name to show him he was going to change him. Israel was named Jacob first, meaning he was a deceiver. But God was going to change his name to being a prince of God, Israel. And so Israel had 12 sons, 12 tribes of Israel. And God promised to go into the land. He was going to give them the inheritance of the heathen lands. And at this point, God told him to take out your sword, cross over the Jordan, and physically kill every man, woman, and child in the heathen nations that they were going to go into. Now, people don't want to think about that or believe God would have them say that or have them do that. But in the Old Testament, he did, because the heathen were pagans. They burned their kids to sacrifice to their gods. They would just do horrible things. And God said, you're not going to be able to change these people. Kill them all. So there was a time God had him take the sword so that they could inherit what he promised. But this is not how you can inherit the new kingdom of God, by the sword. There was a time in this country, America, in 1776, that Minutemen took out their muskets and they armed themselves against a king and against tyranny to start a new nation, a nation under God, God-fearing people, to write up a constitution where we would be ruled by the rule of law and by, at the beginning, basically, by God-fearing commandments. And whether or not you want to believe that it was actually God behind this or not, you know, that's your opinion if you want. You know, I'm not going to go there and try to just prove that God had these men raise up arms and start a new nation. You know, you take whatever you want with that. But they did. That was a time when that's what they had to do to start a kingdom called America. But there is a greater kingdom than America. Okay, we're not here to inherit. Whatever happens, in about 3 days, we're going to have an election. November 3rd. This is where I'm teaching on the Sunday before the Tuesday. So in 2 days, we're going to have an election. 2020. November 3rd, I think. And that's going to determine, really, where this country is headed. Now, I'm hoping for the best, but I am preparing for the worst, because God is more interested in the kingdom of heaven than in the country of America. Now, I know America is a great nation. I know we have great freedoms. I'm not knocking that at all. I know people have died, soldiers have died from the 1776 through everything world wars and everything, to keep this nation free. And I'm not belittling that, okay? And we have great liberties, religious liberties. People fled Europe to come to America because of religious persecutions, and they had the freedom to worship here the way they wanted, whether that was true worship or false worship. Um, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I was born in America with these freedoms, because I get magazines called The Voice of the Martyrs every month. All these other countries now, who in the communist China, Russia, all the Muslim countries, you can't worship like you want. Basically, in a lot of these places, you can be put in prison and killed for trying to convert people to Christianity in some of these Muslim countries. So I'm very thankful that I was born here and still live here. But God is more interested in his kingdom than in any country, even America. And if God has to let this country fall to get more people saved, sometimes we're so protective here, so lukewarm, because we don't have persecution like other countries, that we kind of just don't serve God with our whole heart. The people who serve God with their whole heart, the greatest, most powerful Christians, are in persecuted countries like China and Muslim countries, where they could face death if they obey God. Here we don't have that problem. And so we're very lukewarm here. And so God does whatever he has to get people on fire for him. So if it takes whatever, so I'm hoping, that this country will continue. I'm hoping the right person wins the election, who will get this country great in the prosperity. I'm not trying to say I'm not for that. And I know that the other person who would win would bring this country into socialism and give it up to communism. I mean, they would basically sell out to China. If you want to go to my website, hisgreatlot.org, I have an article called Are You Ready? And if you go to that article, you'll see that I had a dream in 2008. And in the dream, I saw Chinese warships. This is 2008. I saw Chinese warships off the coast of California. And I tried to warn everybody when no one listened to me. Then I saw a war map on the ground. And on this war map was a date. Not the year, just the month and the day. So 6 months later, when this month and day came along, I looked up on the website, and that day, China and Russia met to discuss military alliance and economic alliance. On that day, I saw in my dream, and we were already at war with China. We had the trade wars first, and so dream was in 2008. Okay, I put this on my website in 2011, and just a couple of years ago, we had trade wars. And now we're at the war with this virus. China sent this virus here. I don't care what you want to believe. China sent it here as a war against us. So, I mean, there's one candidate, if he wins, he was already been selling out to China, and he would sell this country out to China. So, I don't wish for that. Jesus here said, this is not my will. I don't want to die on the cross, but if that's your will to save mankind, I'll do it. And Peter here was not willing to give up his political, you might call Jesus his political favorite. He was going to take out the sword and kill to keep him here. But Jesus said, this is not the kingdom that I have come to set up. But from there I want to go to verse 35. Skip over to 35. Pilate answered Jesus, am I a Jew? Your own nation and your own chief priest delivered you to me. What have you done? And Jesus answered Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight for me, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from here. Okay. So, put your sword away. Whatever happens in 2020 election, put your sword away. Both sides. Okay, put your sword away. The only sword we can take out is the sword of the Spirit, which means pray in your new prayer language. You go to Ephesians chapter 6. Go ahead and read that. It says to put on the whole armor of God, that you can stand in the evil day. So no matter what evil comes, he does want you to put on the whole armor of God to stand in the evil day. Okay? Stand. And one of the weapons, it says, is your shield of faith and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. So the sword now is the Word of God, not only of physical word in the Bible, but a spiritual word you hear from God telling you something in your prayer closet. Like Jesus knew for sure he had to go to the cross because he heard the Father tell him that. That's the word. That's the sword of the Spirit. Okay, that's the sword we need to take out. Your prayer language God can give you in the Spirit. Okay, Jesus prayed for almost 3 hours here in his prayer closet to be sure he knew what God wanted him to do. Okay, verse 12. The band of soldiers took Jesus and bound him up and led him away to Ananias first, for he was father-in-law, he was the high priest. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was necessary that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. The disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus unto the palace. So Peter stood away. Okay, Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did one of the disciples, and we believe that was John. And that disciple, John, the high priest, knew him and let him come into the palace with Jesus. But Peter stood outside of the door, outside. Then went out that disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spoke unto her that kept the door, and he let Peter in. So Peter was on the outside, John had gone in, and John came and spoke to the high priest and asked him to let Peter in. So they opened the door and let Peter in. Okay. So that was in the court. That wasn't in the palace, inside where they were questioning Jesus, and they had, putting him on trial. That was inside. But outside the courtyard is when they let Peter in the courtyard, on the outside. Then said that the damsel that kept the door, she said unto Peter, Art you not also one of those men, one of his disciples? And Peter said, I am not. And the servant and the officer stood there, who had made a fire of coals, because it was cold. And they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them to warm himself. And the high priest then asked Jesus, the high priest asked Jesus about his disciples and about his doctrine. And Jesus answered the high priest and said, I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in the synagogue and in the temple, where the Jews always resorted. And in secret I have said nothing. I didn't say nothing in secret. I said it always openly to the public. Why do you ask me? Ask those that heard me what I have said to them. Behold, they know what I said. And when he had spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus in the face with the palm of his hand, saying, Do not answer the high priest that way. And Jesus said to him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of my evil that I've spoken. But if I spoke well, why do you smite me? Now Annas had sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. So go back to Simon Peter. He stood outside warming himself. And someone said unto him again, Art not thou one of his disciples? And he denied it and said, I am not. That's the second time he denies it. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman or his relative, whose ear Peter had cut off, said, But wait a minute, didn't I see you in the garden with him? And Peter denied it again the third time, and immediately the cock crowed. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should defile themselves, but that they might eat the Passover. Now, it doesn't say here, but in another gospel, after Jesus denied him the third time, it says he went away and wept bitterly. Peter denied him the third time and realized what Jesus had told him that was going to happen, and he went away and wept. It says this in another gospel. So they led Jesus into the judgment hall. And Pilate went out to him and said, What accusation? Well, Pilate went out to the Jews who didn't want to come into the judgment hall. He asked the Jews, What accusation are you bringing against this man? And they said, If he were not a malefactor or a criminal, we would not have delivered him to you. And Pilate said, You take him and judge him according to your own law. The Jews therefore said to Pilate, It is not lawful for us to put a man to death. So in other words, it wasn't lawful for him, the Jews, to kill Jesus. So they wanted Pilate to do it. that the saying of Jesus would be fulfilled, which he said, signifying what death he would die by. And then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus and said, Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answered, saying, Do you say this of yourself, or did others tell you that? And Pilate said, Am I a Jew? It's your own nation and your own chief priests that delivered you to me. What have you done? And then Jesus says, My kingdom's not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from here. So Pilate said unto him again, Art thou a king? And Jesus said, Thou sayest that I am a king, and to this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness of the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. So everyone that hears his voice are those who want to know the truth. If you want to know the truth, you will hear his voice. If you don't want to know the truth, he will not speak to you. Period. Pilate said unto him, What is truth? And then when he had said this, he went out again and said to the Jews, I find no fault in him, but you have a custom that I should release unto you one prisoner at Passover. Will you therefore that I release unto you Jesus, the King of the Jews? But they cried all together, saying, No, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. So there was a custom on Passover that the Roman government, Pilate, could release one prisoner to them, whoever they asked. So he thought he could get out of this, So he said, Well, look, they have this custom. Do you want them to release Jesus to you? No, we want you to crucify him. We want Barabbas, who was a robber. Now Barabbas, if you look up this, I think Barabbas was one of the, well, I won't go there because I'm not sure. But I know there were some men in the Bible talks about how they were insurrections, where they would rise up against the Roman government because they rebelled against the Roman government, and so they were put in prison. And I'm not sure Barabbas was one of those, so I won't say that. If I clarify it maybe later, if I look it up. But they would rather have a robber and a criminal be released instead of Jesus. So, go to, I'll read one more scripture, then we'll close this teaching, and then we'll continue in John 19, which was actual crucifixion. Okay, but in John 12, I'm going to read that. In John 12:23. Jesus answered them, John 12:23, The hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Talking about his crucifixion, and this was just before he begins 4 chapters of speaking to his disciples before it. Verily, verily, I say to you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it dies, it will bring forth much fruit. He that loves his life will lose it, but he that hates his life in this world shall keep it into eternal life. If a man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Now is my soul troubled, and what should I say? Father, save me from this hour? But it's for this cause that I even came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. So again, he talks about his soul being troubled. But he knows that you can't love your life in this world. Well, I want to do what I want to do in this world. This is my life. I want to give in to sin a little bit now and then. I want to drink every now and then. I want to, I want to just take time, pleasure, and just, do what I want in life. That's loving your life in this world. And if you do, you will lose it. If you go to Luke 9:23 says the same thing. I don't have that on the board. But Luke 9:23 says, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross. Jesus took up his cross already. It's our turn. Take up his cross daily and follow me. Whoever will save his life will lose it, but whoever will lose his life for my sake, he will save it. So, Jesus says in John 12:25, He that loves his life will lose it, but he that hates his life in this world. It's not about what you can get out of this world, okay? It's about a greater treasure. What the greater joy set before Jesus at the cross was pleasing God. This is what God wants. I'll do it. And after it's all over with, I will be rewarded. Okay? This was the greatest joy. This is hating your life in this world. I don't want anything in this world to tempt me not to do the will of God. It's because of for some temporary pleasure or temporary reward. I want the eternal reward of obeying God, even if it costs me my life. All right. So I'll close here, and we'll take up in the actual crucifixion and on the next teaching. All right. Thanks.